Welcome to the Private Practice Startup Podcast, where we help ambitious private practitioners across the globe to brand themselves and grow their dream practices. We chat with successful private practitioners, business coaches, and marketing experts, bringing you tons of practice building ninja tips. Visit privatepracticestartup.com for awesome resources, attorney-approved private practice paperwork, and our signature marketing e-course. Here are your co-hosts, Dr. Kate Campbell and Katie Lemieux.
Hey there, Startup Nation. Welcome back to another episode of the Private Practice Startup Podcast. If you're brand new to us, you are joining us at a great time. We are right in the middle of one of our podcast mini-series. We love to do mini-series. We pick a very specific topic and do 6 days of podcasts back to back. This time, we're doing a mini-series on tribulations to thriving as a therapist and sharing therapist stories of hope, inspiration, courage, and how they went from where they went from in life to where they are now and thriving in private practice. Today, we welcome Cherilyn Schutze, and she is the owner of Hope Springs Counseling. And a little bit about her, she's a licensed professional counselor, certified clinical anxiety treatment professional, EMDR trained, mother of 4 daughters and 2 dogs, widowed almost 8 years ago, shortly after starting her licensure hours, and she'll be talking a lot about that. Recently, she went into private practice with one of her best friends since 7th grade, and it's been a lifelong dream for her. They started in 2008 and finally attained their goal in 2021. But before we introduce Cherilyn formally to you guys and start with her story, we hope that you guys joined us for the last episode where we spoke with Mary Minhard, and Mary shares about her story, and she survived a suicide attempt, became a paraplegic, and has now shared her pain into her purpose. So definitely check that out. And if you're brand new to our podcast, we want to welcome you to the Startup Nation family. We have a gift for you. That is Your Dream Private Practice Playbook. You can grab that by heading over to privatepracticestartup.com, slide on over to the resources tab, and there you will see it. This is the exact step-by-step methodology that Kate and I built our 6-figure private practices and helped many therapists do the same. And if you're a loyal listener, we wanted to say welcome back, and we hope you're enjoying this series regarding tribulations to thriving as a therapist. And before we dive into Cherilyn's story, let's just take a quick moment for our sponsors. Hey there, Startup Nation listeners. We have an interesting fact for you. Did you know that 75% of people will judge your credibility based on your website design? In other words, if you've been putting off updating your private practice website, you could be driving away potential clients and missing out on that income. So today we want to talk to you about a company called Brighter Vision. Brighter Vision makes marketing simple for therapists, starting with a professional website that's specifically designed to attract your ideal clients and get them to contact you. All of their sites come with unlimited support and are fully optimized to rank well with search engines. They've even designed an automated blogging and social media platform specifically for mental health professionals. Best yet, we've worked with them to create an exclusive offer just for you. Get $10 off every single month for your entire first year on any new Brighter Vision website package. Plus, try out their new social media automation platform designed specifically for therapists for 3 full months completely free. That's a total savings of well over $200. To learn more and get started, head over to brightervision.com/try, TRY/startup. Again, that's brightervision.com/try/startup. Therapy Notes, that's therapynotes.com. It's the highest rated electronic health record system that's specifically designed for behavioral health professionals. With over 1,000 verified reviews and an average customer rating of 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com, Therapy Notes is the #1 rated EHR software that's proven to help automate your professional life. Billing, note-taking, scheduling, and telehealth have never been easier, with live telephone support available 7 days a week. So a real person can get you real answers really fast. Try Therapy Notes today with no strings attached. If you already use an EHR system, Therapy Notes can easily transfer your records safely and securely. Remember, telehealth is included completely free with every subscription. And there's always special discounts for nonprofits, students, and universities. Therapy Notes wants to personally thank you for making our world a safer space. Visit therapynotes.com and use promo code PPS, as in Private Practice Startup, to get 2 months free. That's promo code PPS. Cherilyn, welcome.
Thanks. I'm excited to do this.
We are excited to have you, and thank you so much. We're just really grateful for all of the therapists who submitted entries and shared their stories. I mean, Kate and I were very touched by many of them, and it was hard to choose just 6. But we really look forward to you sharing your story with us today. So where shall we start with your story?
I think I'm going to start way back in the beginning. So I went to school at the University of Texas, majored in psychology and English, got a teaching certificate because my mother said, you need to have something to fall back on with psychology, because that's what they said back then. So I did that. I didn't really want to be a teacher. I really wanted to be a therapist. I'd always wanted to be a therapist. I married my high school sweetheart. We got married 6 months after graduating, and I took the GRE right before I graduated. Studied all of that, but I didn't have the confidence to do anything with it. School wasn't my thing. I did fine in school. I just didn't love it. And it was kind of a means to an end for me. So we got married, and I went to work as a loan processor. So I didn't even go into
Interesting. That's like way far off of both.
And it's not even in my wheelhouse, so I don't even know.
Very different direction.
Right. So then a year later, I decided, well, I guess I'll try teaching. I taught middle school for 2 years, had my first daughter, and said, nope, I'm going to stay home with my daughter. But in the back of my mind the whole time, I want to be a counselor, but maybe someday. And my aunt actually went back to graduate school at age 50 and got her master's in counseling. So I kind of had that in the back of my mind. So fast forward, my husband got sick, and my oldest daughter, I had 4 daughters. My oldest daughter had a lot of chronic illnesses. And so she wasn't well. And then my husband ended up becoming sick. He actually had brain surgery the year before my 4th daughter was born.
Wow.
So we dealt with he had several different rare chronic illnesses. So I ended up working from home for my brother, who had some medical offices in Austin. And so I did everything. I did administrative, hiring, care coordinator, a bunch of everything from home so that I could be home. And so my husband would work off and on when he could. So there was a lot of stress in my house. And my brother pulled me aside one day and he said, you can have this job as long as you want, but I think you need a career. I think you need something more than a job. And a couple of years before that, I had looked into going back to school as for marriage and family therapy. And my GPA was 0.2 of a point too low for that school. And so I was like, well, forget that. I guess it's not meant to be. And then my brother had this conversation with me. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to look in to see if my GRE scores are good, because I don't want to take that test again. And so that was the last year they were going to accept scores. So it'd been 20 years since I had taken the GRE. That was the last year they were going to accept scores that old. So that told me, I better do this. So I applied to graduate school. I got in, scared to death because, school wasn't my thing. I loved every minute of it. I graduated summa cum laude, and I was sad to leave it because I'm kind of a therapy nerd. I love learning about that kind of stuff. But in the midst of all of this, my oldest daughter had suffered from major depression. So I had a chronically ill husband, my oldest daughter with major depression. I had 3 younger daughters. And so I was trying to juggle all of that.
Wow.
And fear had kept me from doing things earlier in my life. It had kept me from applying to graduate school. It had kept me from teaching originally. And so I just took a leap of faith and went to school and decided. And so it was like, yes. So 2 things were certain in my, 3 things. Marrying my husband. When my first daughter was born, it was that, this is what I meant to be a mother. And then going to graduate school was, yes, this is what I'm meant to do. This is my calling. And I had my internship professor I loved her. She was amazing. And I remember telling my husband, it would be so awesome if I could work with her. Well, she asked me to start a private practice with her in Flower Mound. So that was awesome. But 2 months before I graduated, my husband was diagnosed with cancer, multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer. And it was in the stage, it's called smoldering, which meant that it was it was kind of under the surface. It wasn't fully appearing. So he could just kind of go on about his life and they would just watch it. So I graduated in December, went into private practice in March with my internship professor. A few weeks later, my husband's cancer went from 0 to stage 3, which is the highest stage for multiple myeloma. So we had to figure out what we were going to do. So we started chemo. We took a trip. My brother paid for us to take a trip before he started chemo because...
Same brother that encouraged you to go get a career? I like this brother.
yeah. I have 3 brothers and a sister, and they're all awesome. And he's been one of my biggest cheerleaders. So we took this trip. My husband started chemo. In the meantime, I'm trying to do private practice. And, it's hard to earn a living with 5 clients, right? Yeah. On an internship pay basis, right? But I continued to do that while he did chemo. And then he had a stem cell transplant that September. And I don't know if you know anything about that, but they harvested his own stem cells. So they basically have to wipe out your immune system completely and then transplant your stem cells. So still trying to hang on to this private practice piece, support my husband, support my daughters, and do this. And, but, I had a really strong faith, and I knew that, this is what I was just going to do it, All of a sudden there was some strength that I didn't know I had. It shows up when it needs to, if you let it, right? And so my husband had the stem cell transplant. He was in the hospital for 2.5 weeks, was in an almost complete remission, which was great news because multiple myeloma is a cancer that people can live with for 10, 15 years. So our hope was in 10 or 15 years, they'll have a cure, right? That's what we're thinking. So he came home, but because his immune system did not come back, we had to live the way people are living in the pandemic. It was, he couldn't go anywhere, hand sanitizers, change your clothes when you get home, all of that. All of the pandemic stuff, nothing new to me. So he was doing pretty well. We'd planned a trip to Paris to celebrate his remission, to take my girls to Paris because we'd had so much heartache because the last 10 years had been, or 20 years, had been a lot of heartache with my daughter's illnesses, my husband's illnesses, stress, financial stress, just all of that. So we were going to celebrate his remission. Then came March again, his cancer came back with a vengeance. Mm-hmm. And so we did the whole thing over again. Mm-hmm. And I'm still trying to do private practice with my 5 to 7 clients. It's not my practice. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, can I ask a quick question? Sure. I was just curious for context. How old were your daughters? You had 4 daughters, so the oldest was... So the oldest, let me think... At this time, the oldest was 24. Mm-hmm. So my daughters are 3 years apart. And the youngest is... So my oldest is 10 years older than my youngest. Mm-hmm. And so my youngest at that point was almost 15. She was 15. So my youngest was 15 and my oldest was 14. She was almost 15. I don't know. Somewhere around there. Okay. Sure. And so he had another stem cell transplant, was in the hospital for a month, and I stayed with him 24/7. My children kind of would bring me clothes, and I'd come home for 2 hours or whatever.
And I would do a little bit of private practice here and there. And then in June of 2013, he passed away. Really unexpectedly. The doctors thought he had an infection, and it turned out that cancer had taken over his body. And
wow.
And so expected but not expected, one of those things where, you know it's in the back of your mind, but, I'm a firm believer in hope, thus the name of our counseling. I had someone say to me, it's a very good possibility he could die. And I said, I know that, but I'm not going to live in that place because that's not going to serve me to, it's back there, but it's not going to serve me to be, I have to stay in the place of hope. And so that's where I stayed. So he passed away. I was an intern still at the time, and I put my license on hold. So it took 9 months to just be with my girls. They camped out in my room. All 5 of us slept in my room for the whole summer for 2.5 months, trading places, sleeping in the king size bed with me and 2 on an air mattress and 2 dogs. And so it really brought us together. We took the trip to Paris that my husband said, we want you to go to Paris. We did that. We landed in Paris on his birthday. And that was, I started to feel joy again on that trip. So again, March, something about March. 2 of my daughters are born in March. I was born in March. I don't know what it is about March, but in March I decided, okay, it's time for me to go back to work. So I went back into counseling with somebody else in another practice in Flower Mound, who became my supervisor eventually. But I needed income. And again, 5 clients a week isn't going to pay the bills. And I needed insurance for myself and my daughters. So someone suggested I do crisis counseling for the major hospital group here in Dallas. I think they have 17, 20-something hospitals. And I don't know whether you've done that or know what that's like, but I always said, I don't want to work with that population. That scares me. Again, fear. I was letting fear get in the way. I had all these limiting beliefs, right? I can't do that. I can't work with that population. But again, I found myself in that position of, I got to step out of my comfort zone and I have to do this because I have to at least look into it. Well, they hired me that day on the spot, which I didn't expect. So I didn't have a lot of time to think about it, jumped into it. And so I went to all the emergency rooms in the Metroplex and beyond. So some days I would drive 80 from one hospital to another, 80 miles difference. So I did that PRN as needed and then eventually full time. So I was working 12 to 18 hour shifts, 3 days a week, and still doing private practice. Wow. And I loved the crisis work. I loved it. And what I loved about it, again, was this hope piece. These, meeting people in their most vulnerable time where they feel they have no hope. And to be able to walk in a room and help someone find just a little bit, just enough hope to get them to the next step. And I felt like I could relate to them, having, been the parent of a daughter who had major depression. It's a very scary place to be as a parent. And so I could empathize with those families in that way. And so I loved that job. And I loved doing private practice. And my sister-in-law said to me, you went from crisis in your own family to other people's crisis. Like, that's what we do, right? That's what we're trying. Like, that's what I knew. So it fit. So I don't know whether you know, but when you work in a hospital, they do a TB test when you first start. And then every year you have to do a TB test. So my yearly TB test came up and it came back inconclusive. Then they did the blood test and it came back positive. So then they did the chest x-ray. And if there's something in your chest, so then they did the CT scan. And so I'm at my doctor's office. He hands me a mask. He says, put this mask on, go straight home. Do not pass go. Go straight home. Wait for the health department to call. So all of a sudden I was just stopped. And I was put in quarantine for 7 weeks in my home.
Wow.
health department came every single day bringing me 4 antibiotics. They have to watch you take it. You have to sign this thing under penalty of law. You agree to take this medication or we can basically put you in the hospital and by a guard and make sure. Of course I was going to take the medication. But
now,
along
Cherilyn,
the way,
what year is this?
So this was 2015. Okay. So my husband passed away in 2013. I took the 9 months off and then did this for a year. So this was 2015. So this was May of 2015. And I was getting sicker. I was not getting better. And so I did bronchoscopies, which is where they put a tube down your throat and into your lungs and fill it up with water and try to get cells to test it. And they kept getting this report of something called nocardia, which they said, first they didn't believe it. It doesn't make sense that you would have nocardia. Well, it turns out I did have nocardia, which is a very rare, deadly lung disease. If it's not caught early, people 100% die if you don't catch it in time. And I think they said 500 to 1,000 people in the U.S. are diagnosed with it a year. So, wow. And the strain I had was a new strain. And so, again, I was stopped. And as I got more sick, I was unable to do anything. And I was in my house for 4 years. Wow. I literally would have to think about, if I put my phone on the coffee table, I'm going to have to lean forward to pick it up, and I don't have the energy to do that. That's how little energy I had. I would have to think about everything I did to conserve my energy because I couldn't function. So in that process, my license expired. Mm-hmm. But I also didn't think I would ever be going back to work again. But I also kept my name on all of the job charts because in my head, this can't be the end. This can't be the end. And so for 4 years, I had in the back of my mind that I wanted to go back to work. I just didn't know how that was ever going to happen because if I took a shower, that took every bit of energy I had for the next 3 days. Mm. So, and then I had doctors telling me, we don't know what's wrong with you. We don't know why this is happening. And I even had one doctor say to me, you look good. Go back to work.
Oh, my goodness.
I had fever. I said, I have fever every day. I can't function. I started taking pictures of my thermometers to prove that I had fever. And then I realized, oh, okay, I can't let his, because you start going, okay, is this in my head?
Yeah, it's crazy making.
Yeah, and I found some doctors who were able to verify what was going on and said, you can't even vacuum your house. You can't even vacuum. You have to conserve your energy. So I did that, all the while thinking, I miss my passion. And so then last year, I started feeling better. 2 years ago. Sorry, it was 2 years ago. I started feeling better. The same brother who told me to get a career, the same brother who sent my husband and me on a trip, took me to Hawaii with his wife, and he said, you need to retake that exam. You need to just schedule it. Because what happened was my license expired. I went before the board to try to get my license reinstated because they no longer let you. Today, you can't put your license on hold as an intern. That rule had changed. So I couldn't stop the clock from running out. So I had to go before the board to plead my case. And they decided, we'll let you keep your hours, which I'd accrued about half of my hours. We have to accrue 3,000. So I'd accrued about half. So they decided to let me keep my hours, but I had to retake that exam. And are you both LMFTs or LPCs?
We are.
So I'm an LPC, but I'm sure the LMFT exam is the same. It's something you never want to do twice.
No.
Yeah.
One and done.
One and done. That was it, right? So, but I still had my book. I still had my CDs, and I studied. In Hawaii, I studied. I studied for 3 months, retook the exam, passed it, and went back to work in my old private practice with my new supervisor who was just so supportive. And after 4 years of doing nothing, I'm now in private practice. I'm starting my own private practice with one of my very best friends. We met in 7th grade English. She went back to graduate school at age 50 to get her LMFT license. She lived in Houston. I lived here. We always dreamed of going into practice together. Didn't know how we were going to make that work. She moved here in September, and we're launching our practice hopefully in the next 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing. What a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, a roundabout, up and down, and all along just knowing the thing that kept me going is just knowing, you have to be in the day you're in. And my friend likes to say, we need to just lace up our cement shoes and put one foot in front of the other. Because she lost her husband 4 years before I lost my husband. So
wow. The same friend that you're going to private practice with?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yes. So the journey was hard. Hard. Every step of the way was hard. But there are rewards in the journey. And so I was always keeping my eyes open for what the rewards are. What are the benefits? What am I going to learn from this? What's the meaning I can take away from this? And I think that's part of what kept me going.
And what were some of those in your husband's death, and then in your daughter's illness and your own chronic illness? What were some of those?
Some of the takeaways?
The takeaways, the lessons.
Yeah. For my husband, not to get preachy, but when my husband had he had a grand mal seizure. That's when that's when his illness first started. And just in the middle of the night, we went to bed. It was 11:30. Both fell asleep. 30 minutes later, I woke up to him having a seizure. I'd never seen anybody have a seizure before. I had no idea what was happening. And in my head, I'm thinking, is he possessed? It was very scary. But I heard this in my soul. You are going to learn from this. And you're going to learn to have faith. And I told my husband that. And he said, yep, that's what we're going to do. We're going to learn from it. And so from that day on, we took everything as a lesson. What are we supposed to learn from this? How can we take this and turn it into something? You can look at things as either every time something good happens, something bad happens, or you can reframe it. Every time something bad happens, there's good that can come from it. And that was the lesson I was hoping my children were going to learn. And also recognizing that people are watching us, whether we know it or not. People are getting takeaways from us. And sometimes the lessons aren't only for us. Sometimes they're not even for us. Sometimes the lessons are for other people in our lives. So that's one of the things that I learned was that, lessons are for me, but they're also for people around me. And that there is beauty in pain. There really is beauty in pain. My husband's death, while it was, I'd known him since I was 17 years old. And so while it was the most excruciating pain, I can't explain, you can't describe that kind of pain. And especially, watching your daughters go through that as well. And we watched him die for 5 days. We watched him die. And his whole family, he's got a very large family, 11 brothers and sisters. So his whole family was at the hospital. And we were all there with him when he died. And it was painful and it was beautiful. And it's to be able to say that, that's a lesson for me and a lesson for all of us that there can be beauty in pain. And we all came together in a way that it wasn't planned. It was just organic, and the love and the outpouring of support for each other, and the way my girls and I came together. We were all fighting this battle together, and it solidified it for us. So that's another lesson, is just, not taking the pain and letting it destroy you. Take the pain and let it grow and do something with it. And that's what I wanted to do, is take the lessons I've learned and the compassion that I feel for other people who are experiencing pain, whatever it may be, emotional pain, chronic illness, just taking that compassion and empathy, and I want to give that back. I want to be that for other people. And so a lesson for me is just that learning to be open to whatever comes your way and do something good with it. Do something good with it. Don't let it pull you down or destroy you or hurt others in the process. Make good with it.
Cherilyn, I'm just curious, as you were going through your own chronic illness and knowing that your children lost their dad, that you lost your husband, and being faced with maybe not getting better or maybe your own death, what was that like, and what kept you going during those dark times?
My faith, first of all, just that there's something good is going to come from this. I'm going to make something good come from this. And believe me, there were days where I was just, I don't know how I'm going to keep doing this. I'm not a saint by any stretch. I don't want to give that impression, because I'm human just like everybody else. And there were days. And in my early stages of grief, I remember saying to my therapist, why don't people tell you what grief is like? Because this isn't at all what I thought it was going to be like. Not at all. We don't know that because people don't talk about grief. And so I learned that grief is its own thing. And I'm getting off of your question, and I realize that. But I think that's something important that I want to get out there, is that people don't understand that grief is an individual thing. I kept saying to my therapist, okay, I just want you to tell me how to do this so that I can do it right. I just want to make sure I'm doing this right,
And what, move past it? Is that what, get it done, let's get this over with,
it wasn't even get it over with, it was just to make sure I do it right so that I don't get stuck, and I've got to model this for my children, and what are those stages of grief? And he's like, hold on. Those stages of grief are not stages of grief. They're just, some people experience all of them. Some people experience none of them. And they're not, they don't go in any specific order. And your grief is your grief. And the way you do it is you do it your way. Yeah. You just have to do it. In other words, feel. Because I was so afraid to feel that pain again. I cried for so many days in the hospital. I was so afraid that if I did it again, I was going to fall apart and not be able to be there for my kids. And sorry, I know I went off on the tangent, and now I'm
it's
forgetting
all perfect.
The whole question was.
It's all perfect. No, it was just, I was curious, have lost your husband and then you having your own chronic illness. And I'm sure the thoughts crossed your mind about, maybe you be leaving your children, and what was that like, and what kept you going through those dark times?
Well, the hardest thing for me was that my children were having to go through that with me. That's been the hardest. And it still is hard for my kids. Even, they're adults, and it's hard because they lost their dad. They watched, they lived with this chronic illness. They watched that happen. And then all of a sudden their mom now has this chronic illness, and not too long after their dad died. And I was one of those, I'm patting myself on the back after he died going, look at me. I got through all of that with no issues, right? Because you hear about people who deal with, are caretakers for so long, and it takes a toll on their body. Well, I really believe that's what happened with me. I think I was burned out and didn't know it. And so I was set up, my immune system set up to get something. So I had patted myself on the back, like look at how, strong I am. But so to have my daughters, that was the hardest part, was that my daughters had to re-experience that with me. So what kept me going was I wasn't going to let that be the case. And I also listened to them, because it's important that they're able to say to me, I'm scared for you. like this pandemic thing has been really hard for them because right now I have lung damage from my illness. And I'm in remission from my other illnesses. So I'm in a good spot, but it could easily go the other way. So that's scary for them. So that's something we talk about. We talk about it, and I take that into consideration. And maybe I would be doing more things, but I take into consideration that that's scary for my kids. So I just pay attention to that.
Nice. Cherilyn, thank you so much for sharing your journey and your story. And I mean, I feel like I hear your message that you instill, but I would like for you to share what it is that you most hope our audience takes away from your message and your story.
I think a couple of things. The first thing is hope. Never give up hope. If we let go of hope, then what do we have? We have despair. And so I always hang on, even if it's just a tiny glimmer of hope, hang on to that hope, but also perseverance to recognize that we're stronger than we think we are. And my friend Daphne, who I'm in practice with, she's so wise. She has so many wise sayings. She's the one who said about the cement shoes, but she also says, because you did that, you can do this. So basically, let's take our life experience and what do we learn from that and apply it to today. You got through that. You did that, which means you can do whatever this thing is today. And that's what we keep reminding ourselves. And we've come up with this 10 reminders for perseverance. Build a team, make sure that you have a support system, recognize where you've been and what you can do, recognize your worthiness, and give yourself grace and learn from mistakes. Mistakes are opportunities. They're not failures. They're opportunities. But the biggest thing is to have hope and to persevere. That's what I hope people can take away. We're stronger than we think we are.
And definitely that has shown in numerous times and places in your life. And we so appreciate your story and sharing with us and being with us here today. So thank you so very much.
Thank you so much for letting me share.
Yeah, our pleasure. And Startup Nation, we hope that you guys join us tomorrow for another podcast in this series, Tribulations to Thriving as a Therapist. And we speak with and invite Tyrese McAllister. Tyrese has a really difficult story that she shares. She worked for many years as a trauma therapist in interventions and even been on homicide scenes, and then had to experience the murder of her own daughter. And her daughter was 18. So she shares her story and what keeps her going through that. So don't miss that episode.
Yes. Thank you, Cherilyn, for being here today and sharing this story. It was definitely a story of perseverance in so many different ways. And you just exude this strength and hope. And I love the name of your practice, the Hope Springs Counseling. It just that constant stream of hope that just keeps bubbling no matter how dark and how difficult things go. So we wish you the best of luck in your practice building journey with your best friend from way back in the day. And I hope you keep us posted on the next steps and how things evolve for you. Startup Nation, yes, we hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will look forward to seeing you all on the next one tomorrow. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks for joining us on The Private Practice Startup. Visit theprivatepracticestartup.com for awesome resources, free trainings, attorney-approved private practice paperwork, and so much more.